Chapter 7 Your Style. This chapter is devoted to the qualities, characteristics that will ultimately make you the type of presenter you want to be. While there isn't only one right way to present, these guidelines will help you become effective in shaping your unique style. Personality. Your genuine personality will also be reflective of your presentations. You can't escape it, and there is no need to. Be comfortable in your own skin. Presenting takes practice in terms of strategy and execution, but you also want to make sure that you are yourself when you present. Whatever your personality is, make it work for you so you can engage with your audience. If you're a funny person, great, run with it. Tell a joke in the beginning, during, or at the end of your presentation. I'm not a funny person. I just don't have that quality, but I do have others. On occasion, when I am funny, I'm funny by accident. At least that's what my friends would say. So I avoid trying to be funny whenever I present or teach. I'd be a big failure otherwise. Sometimes I could be funny by being self-deprecating, which I love doing, and that may apply to you too. But I focus on my personality traits instead, being sincere and a straight shooter. So I don't believe in the advice that many communication books offer. Be funny or tell a joke in your presentations. How can you be funny if you're not funny? You can't. Funny people are born, not made for the most part. You know all of those comedians that you've never heard of, that you've also never seen on Saturday Night Live? And for some reason, you keep missing their HBO comedy specials. Oh, that's right, because those were the comedians that failed because they weren't funny. You can go to business school, medical school, dental school, bartender school, cosmetology school, and you can even go for improv lessons, etc. But the last time I checked, there isn't a funny school. Whether you're funny, serious, or sincere, just make sure you're authentic. When you're trying to be something you're not, your audience will notice. In fact, strangers will be able to detect this even faster and more intuitively than your friends and coworkers. It's a law of nature. Body language. Many books on communications will offer a significant amount of techniques when it comes to body language. For example, some presentation coaches will tell you to never place your hands in your pockets. Others say it's fine. Some books offer advice on your shoulders being parallel to your feet. The list goes on. While I respect some of the advice, I don't use it all that much and never quite believed in it too much. Many of those tidbits of advice just seem so technical. Furthermore, they're not necessary for a successful presentation. Nonetheless, and not to sound like a hypocrite, I'm providing the most important things I've learned over the years. Body language is indeed incredibly important, but the best advice I can give is to be natural. Be comfortable in your own skin. This takes practice for some of us and comes a bit easier for the rest of us. And again, when you own your content, you feel comfortable. You have full command of the room. Here are some general takeaways on body language. Bullet 1. I tend to walk around the room a bit. Obviously, this also depends a bit on the logistics of the room. Just make sure it's not arbitrary. If done properly, this can be very purposeful. Walking around the room at times keeps people's eyes on you, and it literally keeps the air in the room flowing and fresh. In a larger room, it also gives your audience the feeling that you're giving all sides of the room attention. Bullet 2. While there may be times when you have no choice but to speak behind a podium, my advice is to avoid them. Don't hide behind podiums. Show yourself. With some exceptions, podiums are for those who don't like to speak. Bullet 3. While I don't put much emphasis on whether you have your shoulders parallel to your feet, etc., I've noticed that some men tend to have their feet glued to the floor and they end up rocking their bodies back and forth. I've never understood that, so just please avoid it. Bullet 4. To be an equal opportunity critic for a moment, I sometimes see women cross their feet. This can be a sign of nervousness or taking the presentation too casually. Please also be mindful of this and try your best to avoid it. And bullet 5. Make sure that you don't have any, quote, lazy head movements. I've seen head movements that just don't coincide with anything. People notice that sort of thing, believe me. You want to create a balance between running the presentation and physically connecting with your audience. It's also worth mentioning how crucial your physical proximity to your audience is. I've seen many presenters stand near the wall and away from their audience. I don't believe this is intentional, but it does send the wrong message. Even if you don't walk around the room and choose to stay stationary, try not to be physically distant. You don't want to breathe down people's throats, but at the same time, don't be shy. Get a little close, show some warmth. Facial expressions and misconstrued intent. Facial expressions are clearly important, but I think there's something about them that needs to be addressed. I've seen some presentations over the years where the intro was meant to be fairly straightforward, but the audience began laughing. In a case like that, I'm critical of the presenter. If it was meant to be straightforward, then they didn't do enough to keep it straightforward. If it was indeed meant as a joke and the audience started laughing, well, the presenter, quote, got away with their poor facial expressions and the audience gave them a freebie. They got lucky on that one. So make sure that you can control your facial expressions and they relate back to your intent. If there's something poignant you're sharing at one point in your presentation, for example, don't be afraid to open your eyes wider than usual, or whatever the occasion may call for. The power of a smile. Don't underestimate the power of a smile. If you're doing a presentation that doesn't call for a smile, whether because of a hostile audience, a sad situation, etc., then obviously don't. In general, though, a smile can go a long way. Granted, women might be naturally a bit better at this than men. When a presenter smiles, it causes audience members to smile, and that's powerful. Have you ever noticed that when you're walking down the street by yourself, thinking of something positive and you're naturally smiling, strangers passing in the other direction will give you a smile or partial smile back? You're radiating positive energy. If it works on the street with strangers, trust me, it will also work in a controlled environment like during a presentation or speech. Eye contact. While also overstated, effective eye contact is a prerequisite for effective presentations. Poor eye contact can sometimes indicate either a lack of confidence or a lack of interest. Over the years, I've noticed and categorized 3 general patterns. Good eye contact. People with good eye contact have the ability to look at others while they're speaking, even when it's speaking to crowds of people. When you give your audience good eye contact, you're, quote, in the moment, truly connecting your eyes with your audience as you deliver your presentation. The key is to provide as equal of an amount of your eye contact to the entire audience, to the extent that it makes sense, of course. Limited eye contact. Limited eye contact means that people are utilizing effective eye contact techniques, but only for a small range of their audience. For example, in a room of 20 people, they might be providing good eye contact to only about 3 or 4, 25%. This is quite common. Perhaps you're in eye contact of those you trust or find pleasing. You'll need to practice not relying on that all of the time and be more democratic. No or poor eye contact. This one is obvious. People with no eye contact do 2 things. Essentially, they either look at the floor the entire time or read from their slides. At times, poor eye contact may appear to be eye contact when it really isn't. This occurs when people stare blankly, essentially looking at nothing or looking, quote, through the audience. Don't look through people, look at them. Another sign of poor eye contact is when the speaker attempts to look at the audience, but instead he or she looks at the adjacent wall at about eye level. By looking at the adjacent wall, they are essentially looking at nothing. Improving eye contact. I'll be honest, there's no overnight solution for those with poor eye contact, but it's fixable with the right techniques. There are several things you want to first figure out about yourself before you can identify exactly what needs improvement in your presentations. Are you the type who walks down the halls of your company and puts your head down when someone you don't know walks by? You have to be honest with yourself. If so, you may have a general lack of confidence. That's most likely a larger issue than just presenting and outside the scope of this guide. What about when you watch someone else speak? Do you get uncomfortable when someone with good eye contact makes eye contact with you? If you don't get uncomfortable when others speak and make eye contact with you, that's a good start. Perhaps you're concerned with how long you make eye contact with them. Your poor eye contact might stem from a fear that it may come across as though you're staring, or maybe even creepy. If the length of time is what's holding you back, look at their eyes for a few seconds before you look at another part of their face, and then go back to their eyes, etc. You don't have to, quote, gaze into someone's eyes in some type of romantic way to provide good eye contact. In other words, you don't have to be intense about it as though you're trying to profess your love for them. Remember, you're not staring, you're looking. You don't have to look directly into someone's pupils if you're not comfortable. Instead, you can look around and near their eyes before you get more comfortable. If you've practiced this and now are more comfortable on an individual level, things should get easier for presentations. You want to provide equal amount of eye contact with everyone, especially for smaller audiences of 40 or less. Some people may tell you to practice by making a pattern in your mind, like a figure eight. Do this only if you really need it, but I wouldn't recommend this for two reasons. One, it seems like that would take more brain power than it should, brain power that can be used elsewhere for better purposes. And two, if you're truly doing a pattern, do you really want to be doing a, quote, continuous loop like a robot? While presenting to large audiences, actual eye contact will probably only happen with certain people in the audience. You'll still want to divide the room up in thirds or quadrants and practice the concept of giving each section approximately equal amounts of eye contact. Once you begin to get better at this, I think ultimately the best eye contact should be natural. If you're sitting in the audience, wouldn't you want the presenter to give you some of their attention from time to time via eye contact? I think most of us would say yes. As I previously said, when you're giving a presentation, you're working for the audience. You have to work. Your, quote, poker face. Whether in a corporate or classroom setting, I can guarantee your audience is not going to be made up of equally attentive listeners. That's just a fact. In any audience, whether we know them or not, we have people who will give us more of their attention, give us consistent eye contact, tune into what we're saying, etc. We will also have audience members whose negative body language suggests that they don't care or are indifferent. They may be distracted, not even looking, etc. I know what you're thinking. Not only is it disheartening when you're up in front of an audience giving an important talk and we don't receive the attention we feel we deserve, but we may have a natural tendency to ignore them too. Unfortunately, you can't do that. Let's be realistic. The audience members that give you positive attentiveness are the ones who you'll probably make more eye contact with and be in close physical proximity. However, you can't ignore the less attentive ones. You have to create a, quote, poker face, and while you may not be thrilled, and believe me, this has happened to me in both corporate and classroom situations, you'll still need to give them eye contact and some of your positive body language as well. Whenever you're in a speaking position, you're in a leadership position. That's on you. If they still don't respond, at least you did your part. Honestly, though, if your presentation is long enough, a few hours in total, etc., you have a chance of winning over some of those inattentive audience members. It's not always about you. Sometimes audience members who appear inattentive and as though they don't care may be having a bad day or may be distracted for completely different reasons unrelated to you. Perhaps they have a headache. Maybe they just got off the subway in the middle of a July heat wave and need a few minutes to cool off. It's even possible that their natural disposition causes them to appear withdrawn, but they're actually listening intently. Therefore, you want to be aware of those audience members but not jump to any premature conclusions. If you write them off by ignoring them, then they may truly be turned off. So don't read too much into it. Be a little patient and, more importantly, be a leader. Not always, but sometimes, you'll be pleasantly surprised at the outcome. Inflection, tone, pitch. Being monotone is a universally bad thing. I'm sure you've heard this. Speaking in a monotone way means that there is no pitch variety. Everything you say sounds the same. Have you ever known someone to suffer from the following issues? Bullet 1. They're trying to be sarcastic, but it comes across as serious. Bullet 2. They have something exciting and positive to say, but it's tough for them to convince you that they're excited. Bullet 3. They have some bad news to share, but they don't seem upset. And bullet 4. They always sound tired when they speak. Honestly, I don't want to be harsh, but no one wants to listen to a monotone speaker. There should be a natural element to adjusting your pitch as you speak. Sometimes we need to exaggerate a little. Sometimes a lot. Sometimes we need to remember to emote. Our voice should have rhythm to it, and you should allow it to go up and down as needed. The good news is that I simply don't believe that people who are monotone can't do anything about it. If you were to take each monotone speaker and observe them in their personal lives, or at least in a non presenting capacity, I bet you would see them in a different light. I would bet money that they're not monotone. It might be easier than you think to help improve this if you've been accused of being monotone. Remember, there are really only 3 ways your voice can go: up, down, or level. All 3 are necessary, but you need to practice when to use them in harmony. Consider this. Would you necessarily say the following sentences in the same exact way? Tomorrow is garbage day. Make sure to leave the garbage curbside. Or, I just got an offer for my dream job. I've been interviewing with that company for months and I finally got it. I would hope that you'd have more expression in your voice with respect to landing your dream job as opposed to reminding someone to take out the garbage. I once observed someone giving a really solid presentation until he began speaking about his subject being involved in scandals and sex tapes. He presented it in a flat way, unfortunately. He said the words scandals and sex tapes in the same way that you would say a word like doorknob. He was trying to make a point, but his voice had no impact. What a miss. Also, don't make the mistake of simply raising your volume. If all you do is raise your volume, now you're still being monotone, only louder. You've probably made it worse and more painful for the audience. If you're not a loud talker, it doesn't necessarily mean you're monotone. So for those of you who speak more softly, your style may be perfectly fine as is. I've witnessed many presentations where people have a naturally softer voice, but they still deliver a great presentation. The highs and lows in their pitch still exist. Exaggeration. It's perfectly acceptable to dramatize your speech in parts that call for it. Just don't go overboard. Sometimes folks go in the other direction and end up too emotive. It comes across as disingenuous and as if you're overcompensating. Allow me to indulge for a moment and qualify what I mean by excessive exaggeration. There used to be a perfectly fine word that unfortunately no longer seems to exist. Amazing. The word was useful and had purpose. Some things in life were amazing. Overcoming adversity, climbing Mount Everest, winning the Little League championship when no one thought your kid's team ever had a chance, etc. But the true meaning of that word disappeared, and now everything these days is amazing. Getting a sandwich from the corner deli is apparently amazing. See my point? Please do yourself, me, and the entire world a favor and stop abusing that word. Pretty please? If everything is so amazing, from you being proud that your dog had a healthy bowel movement, to going to the Home Depot to buy a gallon of insecticide on a mundane Saturday morning, then what the hell is the purpose of the word? Don't speak, sing. This is a little wonky, but maybe not. I think there is a lot of truth in it. I've always felt that some of my best presentations were when I was actually singing, well, sort of. I still practice this to continuously improve, but when I do it, my audience seems to take a subtle notice to it. I don't actually mean singing. I'm sure I'd be an awful singer if I ever tried. I mean speaking in a rhythm, almost as though it were a song. When your words flow from one to the next and it all sounds good, you sound good. Once again, the words become secondary. George Carlin had a special ability to weave words and sing instead of speaking during many parts of his stand-up routines. Big Carlin fans like myself have noticed this. I don't mean rhyming, I mean rhythm. These are 2 different things. Take the lyrics of any great song and, assuming you're not a professional singer, sing them. Has anyone ever told you, quote, don't quit your day job? You may have butchered the song, right? The words out of your mouth are the same as the artist who has sold millions of copies and has fame and fortune. So what's the problem? The problem is that you don't know how to make those words sound good. Have you ever done karaoke? It can be a lot of fun. Some of us can't karaoke sing our favorite songs even when we know all the lyrics. And some of us are pretty good at karaoke because we know how to follow those bouncing balls that jump on top of each word. So learn how to make it sound pleasing. That's what I mean by singing instead of speaking. You may have heard from time to time that some particular person, quote, likes to hear themselves talk. It's almost always meant in the pejorative. Maybe in some ways that's not such a bad thing. Enunciation. About 15 years ago, I read a book on linguistics and found the information on enunciation both interesting and useful. Enunciation is the ability to articulate words in the best possible way. Don't confuse this with pronunciation. Pronunciation has to do with saying a word, quote, correctly, according to the laws of English grammar as well as common use, etc. Enunciation means how the words sound coming out of your mouth. Your, quote, interview voice. I'm sure you've heard about your interview voice, right? You know when you're getting on a scheduled call for a job interview and you answer the phone? Your hello is much different than your hello after picking up the phone when your friends call, right? When it's a job interview, you are so pleasant, dynamic, upbeat, positive, and all that good stuff. But it's the same exact word, so what's going on? That's enunciation. Upspeak. It was suggested by an early reviewer that I add a few thoughts on upspeak or uptalk. I briefly hesitated since I have no unique viewpoints on the issue, but nonetheless, it is worth mentioning briefly. One thing I'll say is that I don't think this is solely attributable to young women, as many people claim. I see men do this too, and quite often in New York City. But it might be fair to say that this is attributable to younger generations and millennials in particular. As you may know, upspeak is generally defined as completing your sentence as though it were a question. The idea stems from an unnatural need to make your sentiments seem positive at all times when it's completely unnecessary to do so. It's about rising your intonation at the end of your sentence when it completely doesn't call for it. While some people may think this is normal, since we're conditioned that way sadly, a lot of people will notice this and see it for what it is, a negative. The trouble is that upspeak seems to have this need for approval or validation, and a lack of confidence. This can truly be a negative, since it seems as though you're putting something on the receiver when there is nothing additional to throw out there. I had a really great time at the beach this weekend. So, are you telling me that you had a really great time at the beach this weekend, or are you not sure and want me to add something to your story to validate it? There are plenty of good videos on Upspeak on YouTube. Check them out.